All right, a good chilly Tuesday morning. This is February 16th. A couple of topics that have come up for the session today. Talking about what Republicans are up to now that they have lost power, including David Perdue deciding, I guess, that he has found it boring to trade stock since he's out of the Senate these days. We're going to talk about voter suppression tactics here in Georgia. The congressional race that's near and dear to my heart, Georgia 11. And then also some interesting news, I think, about the Attorney General race here in Georgia. So those are the topics. I think they'll fill up a little bit of time on the episode today. All right, so topping off, I think it's going to be interesting to see David Perdue putting his hat back into the Senate race. I wanted to go out and anybody can find this information. If you go out to fec.gov, that's F as in Frank, EC.gov, you can go to the campaign finance tab and go to raising and go to all receipts. And if I'm not mistaken, Perdue, because, why should they do any different? You've got a, actually there's a couple of matches coming up here. Now, some of these may be for other states or other folks that have a name Perdue, but there is a Perdue for Senate. There is a Perdue Victory Inc. There's also, interestingly, a Graham Perdue Victory Fund. I guess there's maybe that's an older one that's not active anymore, but I guess Lindsey Graham and David Perdue maybe had a fund together. But let's take a look at the Perdue for Senate fundraising list out here, and you'll find a lot of individual folks that have contributed. There's a huge bucket of money for David Perdue, December 2020. Now, this was around the time that he was trying to raise money to beat John Ossoff. He raked in $2.5 million just through Win Red. So Win Red is the equivalent of Act Blue for the Republicans. So those are those small dollar donations. You got a lot of folks that do the individual maximums, the 2200s, the 2600s, the 2800s. But what is a little more interesting is the corporate PACs and the corporations that give these folks money. Boeing, $5,000, December 2020. You know exactly where that's coming from is because of all of the defense contracting that could be swayed towards there. There's a taxicab, limousine, and paratransit association PAC giving Perdue $2,200. Not exactly sure what is behind that. Let's see. National Association of Convenience Stores Political Action Committee, $5,000 to David Perdue. See if we can find some in here that are a little more, if anybody happens to do business with Invesco. So Invesco, I think they either do insurance or stocks, $5,000 from them. And the reason I'm mentioning these companies, if you happen to do business with them or have any connections, you can contact these companies and ask them point blank. Go to their corporate relations, go to their investor relations contacts. You can find them on their websites and just point blank ask them. I mean, for example, David Perdue did not even show up to his last debate. And we see how that worked out for him. He lost. And you may get a canned response from these companies that is something like, well, we contribute to both sides of the aisle. Well, okay, but it still doesn't, why are you contributing money to folks that just clearly want to throw out votes and they're just not, democratic? Or in the example of David Perdue, he never held a town hall the entire time he was in office. And if you want to go back and say, well, he held a telephone town hall or he had a campaign no, that's not the same. You hold a town hall, it's publicly announced, you show up, you take unscripted questions from the constituents that you allegedly, represent. That is a town hall, not these, snowflake Republican events that they try to pass off as town halls. So this is David Perdue that is going to run against Reverend Warnock because, again, I guess he is bored, not, going to D.C. and being part of the swamp. If anybody happens to do business with PNC Bank, PNC Financial, $5,000, December 2020. The Believe in America PAC, $5,000. I'm sure that has a lot of dark money going through there. Let's see, what else in here? Sunavision Pharmaceuticals, Good Governance Fund, $2,500. You know exactly where that is going for, to make sure that we keep the price of pharmaceuticals high, because we can't have that changing in any time soon. Santander Bank, may not be saying that exactly, but they are a Spanish bank that does have some operations here in the U.S. December 2020, $5,000. You usually will find the large corporations like Home Depot, the large insurance companies, State Farm, Allstate, if any of you have those. Let's see, what are some others in here? But again, anybody can go out to fec.gov, look up, your elected officials, and this is all public information that you can, look out for and locate. Burger King. Okay. Why Burger King is giving money to David Perdue? $5,000 December 2020. I'm not sure. They wanted to make sure that more Whoppers are sold, I guess. So there you go. Do some research, find these companies, call them out. Why are they giving money to these shady representatives? And we'll see what his strategy is. Not showing up to a debate, not holding town halls, snatching phones out of people's hands. If you recall, and I still to this day am just surprised that Ossoff or any sort of PAC did not pick up that footage. But David Perdue was at his alma mater, Georgia Tech, downtown Atlanta. A gentleman walked up as a student, asked him a question, and David Perdue basically snatched his phone and said, "We're not going to talk about that." And there's video footage out there. It made news stories, and nobody used that in the last election. Imagine what having that in a political ad could do for this next election. Reminder here, if folks are puzzled because of this huge election and runoff that we just had, remember that Reverend Warnock won the remainder of Johnny Isakson's term. So Johnny Isakson won 6 years. Kelly Loeffler was appointed when Johnny Isakson stepped down. So Reverend Warnock just has 2 years remaining in that term. So now he's going to have to run again in 2 years. It appears that David Perdue and that other deplorable Doug Collins, because he doesn't have anything better to do, they're going to stand up and try to run against Reverend Warnock. Probably is going to turn into a runoff or a primary between those two because the Republican Party is so splintered right now, which I think is a good thing. You've got Bush Republicans against deplorable Trump Republicans. and that's also a midterm year. So you probably have that as a positive for the Republicans, because typically after a new president takes office, the opposing party does well in the midterms. So we'll see what happens, with that particular Senate race. And you're going to have other Senate races come up in other states in 2 years, and we'll see what happens. So what are Republicans doing in the meantime to make sure that they try to win? Well, let's talk about voter suppression. So thanks to Stacey Abrams here in Georgia, bless her heart, and bless her in a good way, she has shone a light on the voter suppression tactics that have been in play in Georgia and other states for decades. I'm going to read a quote. So I'm going to try to remember on these podcasts and in these episodes to talk about candidates that are running on the blue Democratic side. And one of them is Charlie Bailey. Charlie Bailey ran for Attorney General, excuse me, here in Georgia. The last time around, he did not win. If we want to point out Chris Carr, the current Republican Attorney General of Georgia, he was caught with his pants down and also was caught up in all of the insurrection riots up in D.C. There was a Republican Attorney General PAC. So basically what that is a bunch of Republican Attorney Generals got together and said that we want to do Republican things, even though we are, Attorney Generals, and we're supposed to be the what do they call themselves? The party of law and order. But yet, they still want to steal elections, right? So they all got together and they decided to support the insurrection riots up in D.C. Well, when all that went south, some reporters looked and said, well, it's interesting here, Chris Carr, Georgia Republican Attorney General, you are the chairman of this entity that supported the insurrection riot. What do you have to say about that? And of course, they did the typical backtracking, because Georgia is, teeter-tottering on this whole thing and trying to be on both sides of the fence. Oh, well, I wasn't aware that was going on. Well, you were the chairman of the organization. How did you not know this was going on? So it's always that convenient amnesia that these Republicans, try to pull out. But the Charlie Bailey, he is he doesn't mince words, and I'm on his list of emails that he is sending out. He's also done a number of Facebook Live events, but he has a quote here from the Gwinnett County Elections Board. There's a chairwoman there, Alice Olenek, that's her name, and I'll quote here: "I'm like a dog with a bone. I will not let them end this session without changing some of these laws. They've got to change the major parts so that we at least have a shot at winning." Now, what she's referring to are things like, in Georgia, we've always had for decades the ability to go and request an absentee ballot, and you did not have to have a reason. You didn't have to be old. You didn't have to be disabled. You could just request an absentee ballot, and, one would be mailed to you as long as you had enough time for mail time back and forth, and you would not have to go and stand in line. Well, one of the bills here in Georgia is that they want to propose that you have to send a copy of your driver's license in with the request for the absentee ballot, and then when you fill in the absentee ballot on paper, they want you to send another copy of your driver's license or your state-issued ID. Why? I mean, and of course, the Republicans are doing the same old broken record, voter fraud that they cannot find. And usually the voter fraud that is investigated and found is typically on the Republican side. You have husbands voting for dead wives, and the dead wives are voting for the Republican Party. But we've got these voter suppression tactics in place to try to sway the vote more red. And if we look at the presidential election, they shot themselves in the foot. I don't understand, well, I mean, I guess they all sit in a room and just hem and haw and gripe and bitch at each other all the time. And I guess they feel like they're doing something. I don't understand why they continue to, pull this out and whatever. Other things that Republicans are up to are to the north of us in Tennessee, and you've got other forms of these bills being introduced, but this just came out up in Tennessee. A Tennessee bill would allow fathers to prevent abortions. I'm going to repeat this. There's a bill introduced in Tennessee that will allow fathers to prevent an abortion. Fathers are sperm donors. They don't have to lay in the hospital and give birth. They don't have to carry that child to 9 months to full term and deliver that child. I'm a guy. I cannot have a child. What is this supposed to accomplish? And you had this go on in Georgia, it was about a year or two ago, and I believe that it made some press. I have to go back and find the details. Every one of these bills, right next to it, there needs to be something that is proposed against men's sexual health care, such as mandatory vasectomies. I mean, for example, here in Tennessee, if a father, or I'll call him the sperm donor, because he's not a father until, I mean, they should rewrite the article here. He's not a father until the child is actually born. So that they've already twisted the words here to get their way. Okay, so if you're going to introduce a bill that says the sperm donor is allowed to, stop the abortion, then, okay, he's got to go and get a vasectomy first. Imagine if these types of bills were introduced side by side with these abortion restriction bills. You would see a very, very different result, I feel, in these abortion bills. Every one of them is punitive. It plays a shaming role on women that has no business in the year 2021. That is a private matter between a woman and her doctor and her choice of what she wants to do. And men trying to legislate these matters is truly deplorable. And to stand behind some sort of religious reason when you want to follow the line of hypocrisy along the lines of Trump trying to be religious and along the lines of Jerry Falwell Jr., no. The religious hypocrisy is gone and out the window in 2021. So good luck, Tennessee, on that. You all have fun with that up there. You've also got Dolly Parton up there. I know she minces her words and she does sit on the fence. I guess I understand why she does that, but I would love to truly sit down off the record with Dolly Parton and hear her opinion on that. Moving on, other folks that are running for office. So my lovely representative, I've talked about him several times. He usually does come up in each one of the episodes, Barry Loudermilk. So Barry Loudermilk sits in a very gerrymandered district in northwest metro Atlanta here in Georgia. On February 3rd, he posted this tweet, and he thought that it was so important that he pinned this tweet to the top of his Twitter feed, going after Democrats. Because when you're in the minority, the only thing that Republicans have better to do is just sit around and bitch about Democrats. They don't have anything better to do. Heaven forbid they cross the aisle and do something bipartisan, because then they appear weak to their base. So, February 3rd, Joe Biden has cut thousands of blue-collar jobs. We're in the middle of a pandemic, Barry. Of course, there's no link to any details of this. He's weakened our southwest border. Never mind. I mean, there's no mention anywhere in here that, Barry's deplorable voters actually stormed the House and I can't even go there. This is a doozy. Sent taxpayer money overseas to fund abortions. There you go with the whole abortion bit. That Republicans know that abortions are a very visceral issue, so they always like to hammer on that. And people like Barry Loudermilk, they go to church and they campaign. They try to stand in the pulpit and use that. So they're going to claim that now we're sending taxpayer money overseas to fund abortions. Barry has also introduced legislation that's probably going to go nowhere because he's in the minority, but he likes to claim that he's done something. That he introduced legislation with some other Republican, I think from Missouri, that abortion doctors cannot profit on performing abortions. Great, Barry. I'm glad you actually did some work over the past couple of weeks. Barry also claims he has put terrorists ahead of most Americans for the vaccine. What asinine... Do you just dream these up, Barry? Has your doctor given you really good medication that you have dreamt these ideas up? If anything, your deplorables are getting the vaccine before others. Remember, all of your deplorables were locking you guys up in secure locations without masks. And remember, Barry, you also got COVID because you're hanging out with a bunch of deplorables anyway. And they have ignored scientific evidence that it's safe to reopen schools. Barry's got to go. And one fine lady has already stepped up. Her name is Heather Kilpatrick. So Kilpatrick. You can follow her at least on Twitter so far. Heather K_GA. That's on Twitter again. Heather K_GA. She has put her name in the hat. We'll see if Dana Barrett, who also ran against Barry this last time, if she decides to also step up. I'll have to go back and look for some news on her. But Barry has got to go. His district borders Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. And if you remember in a prior episode, Marjorie Taylor Greene jumped over my District 11 up to 14 to find her a district she could win, to get up to D.C. because she wanted to get up there so bad. Her district is more red than mine in 11. So the right candidate needs to go after Barry, and it's going to take a lot of work. The right candidate to win against Barry is going to have to keep their name constantly in the news, and is going to have to be a constant thorn in Barry's side. It is about the only way that they're going to win, because this district is so gerrymandered. But not as gerrymandered as 14 in Northwest Georgia, but, you've got that. So, also, Heather, want to put out the invitation to any political candidate. I know there's a stigma around the name of this podcast, but it's 2021. After all we've been through with the Trump administration, and you're worried about a name of a podcast, okay, I guess I get that. But I would love to interview any candidate or past candidate that is willing to sit down. A gentleman from Louisiana did it. He's in a very red district, and, we all survive and we're going to move on. So hopefully, glad to have you guys join. All right. So I think that was all in my list here. I got through talking about Perdue, talked about the abortion bills, talked about voter suppression bills, Mr. Bailey. Will is out in Texas. They had a lot worse weather than we did here in Atlanta. A lot of snow and ice. He lost power for a couple of days. They were actually having to burn wood in the fireplace. And a lot of opinions and things going around about, Republican power grids, and so forth. But he's okay, and he'll be back on another episode, and we'll go from there. So have a good week, and talk to you all soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Goddamn Liberals. We welcome your feedback. Please comment on this episode below or send us an email at feedback@gdliberals.com.